Good morning, everybody, and welcome back, or welcome at the Global Cloud Skills Tour, the virtual series. Already the fifth webinar in a series of 6, and it's great to see so many of you back again. Today, I have two guests in the studio here in Amsterdam, Jan Depping and Herman Keizer, and they have written a playbook on the 8 principles of cloud adoption. And they will talk about that during this webinar, but let me first do a brief introduction on LLPA, because LLPA is the organizer of this webinar series. LLPA is an organization of 33 training companies from all over the world. We cover about 52 countries, and LLPA stretches from Latin America to Australia, from Iceland to South Africa. And LLPA is known for the training and certification services. We do international training projects, but the aim in the training projects is to certify people and to make people ready for the future and make sure that they have the skills of the future. And that's also what this series is about. And in those international projects, we provide a single point of contact to ensure that your training projects can be executed everywhere on the globe in the same level of quality. But why are we here? Well, it's in the current times of digital transformation, it's very important that people have the right skills, that you in your company have people with the right skills to make sure that you can benefit from all the technologies that are here now. And many of you realize that, and research has shown that 83% of the companies, they know that they need to have the right skills and that they will benefit from new technologies. But only 60% of those companies, they have a clear strategy in place. And 60% is not very high, but it's even worse. Only 3.5% of the people in the workforce, they have the right skills. And that's actually why we decided to have this Global Cloud Skills Tour. We decided a year ago to have many business leaders in one room. That's when it was still allowed to have many people in one room. To talk about the future skills, to talk about the skills gap that we're facing. The right skills are not available as much as they need to be. And we decided that we would not only do that on one location, but we decided to do that on 9 locations on 4 continents. And we started to execute those events in Belgrade, Helsinki, Johannesburg and Milan. But then COVID-19 came and we had to change our plans. And what we did was creating this series of digital events, virtual events, just to make sure that we can still tell our stories with the guests that we have, with the speakers that we would have on our program, but virtual. So that's actually the reason why we have this virtual series. And we started on June the 2nd with a presentation by Jeffrey and Stephanie about opportunities in the cloud. And 1 week later, we had Jussi Roine from Finland talk about, well, what would happen, how could you benefit from moving your business to the cloud, to Azure. And the third session, 1 week later, was from Lurleen Duggan, Chief Learning Officer of Microsoft Western Europe, talking about the cloud skills journey from Microsoft. And last week, we talked about skills and validation of skills. And Kevin George from Johannesburg spoke about the validation of skills, and Michael Svoboda from Austria, he spoke about how LLPA can support you getting those skills in your company with all the services that LLPA has, just like the Skills Academy portals that we have in place, the branded Skills Academy portals. But today we are here with Herman and Jan, and they will talk not so much about skills, also part of their presentation, but what else is needed to bring your business to the cloud, to bring your business to Azure, the 8 principles. And before I give the word to them and the floor to them, I will tell about the next session, or I will show you the next session next week. That's the last session in the series from Ron Augustus. He's the customer success lead here at Microsoft Netherlands, and he will talk about some customer best practices, customer experiences. And we will also have 2 customers on the floor talking about their experiences. But let's get to today. Jan Depping, Herman Keizer, the authors of the playbook, The 8 Principles of Cloud Adoption. I'm really looking forward to the session. And guys, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for having us. So, Herman, you can have the clicker. So, my name is Jan Depping. I work for Microsoft, I think, for almost 16 years right now. I have a background in computer science and psychology. And I wrote this cloud adoption framework with Herman Keizer. Herman.
Yeah, my name is Herman Keizer. I'm currently a PDM in Western Europe, where I'm driving the data center migration motion. And before that, I was a PTS in the Netherlands, also working very closely in the managed service provider space.
So, why principles? We figured out that although we talk a lot about the journey and the cloud journey, how do you stay on track? And what we did is we figured out that if you use principles, and you also have it in a human perspective, we call it leading principles, but if you have cloud principles, it's way more easy to stay on track. And over the years, we figured out that there were 8 that always came up. So that's why we have 8 principles. This is not a really rigid process. You can have more principles, or you can have less, whatever suits you. But these are the 8 we use every day. So, next slide, please. And although we will have a discussion about technology, the principles are about people, are about processes and technology. So those things are communicating together. If you have a principle, it influences all the 3 parts of this triangle. So for this session, we will dive into the tech part. We will sometimes step out to people. We will sometimes do a little step out to a process. But this is mainly about the technology lens about of the principles. And you can see that we have all kinds of processes, the ITIL processes. Everybody who is using cloud or delivering services in the cloud will do something with processes, and they are mostly based on ITIL. And if you, for instance, have change management, and you have performance management and capacity management, you need to figure out how those principles influences those processes. So again, we will talk about technology, but this is the broader perspective of the principles. So we figured out 8, and we will dive into the 8 principles one by one. So let's join us with the first principle, and that is build to fail. So build to fail is all about having the right mindset. Things will go wrong. If you go to the cloud, things will go wrong. If you're not in the cloud, things will also go wrong. But in the cloud, it's more important to figure out a way to deal with things that go wrong. And if you do it up front, the impact of things going wrong is not that hard. And we will talk about quality. We will talk about services. We will talk about software. But there is always a place where things go wrong. Herman, can you dive a little bit deeper into that?
No, Jan already pointed out, we're talking about build to fail, but the assumption that a lot of people are making when they are moving into a cloud environment, then suddenly all things that they normally did in their own data center are gone. They think, hey, the network latency doesn't exist anymore. They think that bandwidth is no longer an issue. They also think that the network topology is always secure. So there are a lot of falsities, a lot of things they are thinking out of their mind, that they're thinking, hey, that is already there. No. Even you're going from the on-premise world into the cloud world, those things never change. Only you need to think about that. And very important when we're talking about build to fail, is not that build to fail is something that will happen. No, build to fail, or the motion that it will happen, is a feature of your functionality. And that feature can be built into your platform on an infrastructure as a service layer, and it can also be built into your platform as a service failure. And this is not, say, our goal for today to dive in all the nitty-gritty details that can be happened. We just pick out a few examples so that you have also a visual presentation from, hey, we're talking about build to fail, what is the possibility to happen? So if I zoom in, for instance, with build to fail on the virtual machine layer, within Azure, there are already several steps you can make. I can build a single virtual machine, but I can also build it in an availability set. I can also build it in scale sets, or even build it on availability zones. So depending on your requirements, your server level agreement requirements, in your recovery time objective, in your recovery point objective, determines in which form you will apply these, build to fail functionalities.
Okay, and the second one in the line is self-service. Everything you do in the cloud can become really big and really time-consuming in the end. So self-service is a really important thing to think about. How do you manage your services? You can automate things. There are two perspectives. You can say, I automate things for myself, or I automate things to deliver services to my customers. So both areas are really important to think about. And Herman?
Yeah, we're talking about self-service, and you can do it on on your management layer, self-service, but you can also on the delivery layer. Now, what do we mean then? And we're talking about purely about the management layer. Just example over here is what the Azure portal already offers on self-service options. If you took pure looking on the virtual machine layer, so you can do self-service parts purely on, say, deployment of your virtual machine, but you can now do self-service parts on the monitoring, but also if you say, I want to do into, say, getting into the nitty-gritty details what is going wrong, so even go into the serial console. And the nice thing is what you see here is what the portal is presenting, but the portal is just another, viewpoint on the API layer, so you can also incorporate this again into your own software layer. That is purely looking from the management perspective. Another way, if you're talking about self-service, is how do I build my environment? There is also another feature within Azure that is what we call then the marketplace. In the marketplace, there are already completely built solutions over there, so the installation scripts are already there, so you can reuse that building a complete environment. So there's also another form of self-service.
And then there is freedom of choice. It is nice to have a choice. It's always nice to have choice. But if you have a lot of choice, making a choice can be really hard. So freedom of choice is an important thing to think about when you move to the cloud. And the biggest risk you have is that you do things in the cloud the way you did it on premise. And then you don't make use of the cloud in the best way you can imagine. So freedom of choice, although it is a nice principle, it can be really complex in a practical sense.
And specifically, if you go to Azure, there are a lot of things to choose from. So if I want to have a workload running, now to help you in these things, we have a lot of decision trees already available. So on the deck, there is also the links already available. And it's always depending on your why question. So I got this type of workload, and what are the requirements I'm getting to this workload? And that determines, should I run that as a virtual machine? Maybe should I run it as a Azure function? Or should I use it, for instance, as a PaaS solution? So very important is for you to dive into that why question. So if you're pure looking from a hosting perspective, there are several questions you can ask yourself for doing that. And also the other thing, if you're not looking at the hosting part, you can also look at more at the DevOps environment. So regarding the DevOps, you can ask yourself also several questions. And depending on those questions, the decision trees will help you guiding into using the same solution. Or from a scalability perspective. So there are several decision trees already available in the Azure doc site where you can choose from depending on your why question, and also guiding you in which choice you could make in the Azure platform.
And so one of the most important one is trusted. How to become trusted and how to become trustworthy. And this is something you really need to think about. If you go to a new way of working, or you go to a new way of delivering services, if people don't trust you, they won't use the services. So you need to figure out things to do it in a proper way. So we call that a shared responsibility model. So we have a model, we defined a model, and we looked at all the cloud aspects, and we said, okay, if you go really low level and you go to infrastructure, we can manage that. So from a cloud provider like Microsoft, we can deliver well-trusted, trustworthy cloud services. If you go up in the stack, and you can see it here in the middle, then we have a shared responsibility. That means we do things, but you do need to do things also. So that is a mix. And if you go way to the top, for instance, on a data layer, you are responsible for your data. We can help you with all kinds of tools, but you are responsible. There's a lot of content behind this shared responsibility model. You can see the links below. We added the links, so you can use the links to figure out what is the content behind all those shared responsible strategies. And then we have all kinds of websites. We have the trust portal. Every documentation about every certification we have is on the trust portal. So use those portals. You don't have to figure those things out by yourself. You know what we do, we explain what we do, we show you how we do it, we can prove it that we do it because it's audited, and then you can use the stuff you need. So make use of these websites and take the content you need. Number 5, continuous change. This is also a big one. So you have continuous change, you have freedom of choice, and again, that makes it difficult. If you don't recognize these principles, you get stuck. You do things, you don't change things, and before you know it, you do things in the old way, and you can do it in a more efficient way. So continuous change is a complex principle, and you need to find a way to bring it in your products, to bring it in your services. And even if you are a customer and you're on the other side, you're on the receiving side, make sure that you have a partner who embraces this principle. Otherwise, you will get stuck with your partner in old stuff that cannot change.
Now, if we're talking about as continuous change, that is something also that is affecting us now today in our new COVID society. We adapt also to this 1.5 meter society. So you adapt, you change, you are going further. And this is also the basic principle when we're talking about continuous change. And it's not something that is only, say, applicable in your development environment. No, it's applicable in all the layers within the cloud. So what you're constantly doing, you're looking at monitoring your solution. You see how you adapt to those solutions. You create a new build for that solution. And then again, the whole process starts again. So that is not only when we're talking about development, it's also about how you manage your systems. It's also how you manage your network, about your security, your data, or your AI. It's all as an operation. So that is constantly the continuous change cycle is in there. And of course, cloud is already code-based, so everything is what we can do, monitoring the whole environment, then you do a delivery of your environment, then you build and test it again, you do the agile planning, and then the whole process is continuous changing. But it's also about learning. It's also continuous changing. You adapt to the new world, you apply your new knowledge, and then you go to the next level.
Number 6, software defined. We always encounter new ways to do things. And one of the most important things in the cloud, and especially when you scale out, you need to remember that in the cloud everything is software defined. So you don't have hardware, you have software components that simulate hardware, for instance. And software defined is a broad topic. And what we mentioned before, you have continuous change, that also reflects on people. They need to have continuous learning. One of the things they need to learn is, how do we manage software defined? How do we implement software defined? You cannot do things by hardware, you do it by software. So Herman.
Yeah. That's a very important, we're talking about the software defined, and also coming back to the previous principle, continuous change, as Jan already pointed out. The whole platform you're working for is not physical, even though under the lead there is a physical platform, but you're only talking on software layer towards that platform. So everything is already automated. You can use the standard templates that are there, the ARM templates within the platform, to run an efficient automated platform. So you can constantly redo also the platform in that environment. Now, very important when we're talking about that enabler as automation, and we also come to the environment, because your virtual machine you are running is exactly code. So you're talking about infrastructure as a code. So running a virtual machine, installing a virtual machine is running code. Changing to that virtual machine means changing to your code, and you come back again to the whole DevOps principle. You're changing, do a new release of the environment, and you rerun it again. Because everything is built in code, you can also incorporate it into your other scripts. Now, an example, when we're talking about the whole software defined, and one of the big examples that is in the Azure platform is the ARM template, the Azure Resource Manager. even though you have a portal, the portal is just a viewpoint on that one, and that talks again to the common API layer. Even you can use the portal, you can also use PowerShell. You can do other of the REST API layers, and they all talk on the lower level, to the ARM templates, the Azure Resource Manager, and that is the real basic code you are running and maintaining the whole platform.
And Herman, can you say something about, you have, from an architectural perspective, you need to do something with idempotency. So if you build to fail and you have software defined, how do you deal with idempotency?
Yeah, idempotency is, for instance, that you always, when you run your code, you run your script, everything comes back into the same situation in there. So even though you can screw up your system, the moment you are running your script again, everything is set back again in a situation so as you defined in your code.
Yeah, and you have to do that by design.
Yeah.
And you can't do it afterwards.
No.
Okay, pay-per-use. I think we all heard about pay-per-use, but what we see in practice is that you really need to understand what the impact is of pay-per-use. And pay-per-use is a big important thing when you select certain services and when you deliver certain services to end customers. Pay-per-use is a big one, and we have a template and we have a few examples of different scenarios in that template.
Yeah. Now we're talking about that pay-per-use, and that's also one of the big topics you need to think about is right sizing. So the normal thing, what you normally did in the past, you have want to run a virtual machine, so you go to your hypervisor, you select your parameters, create the virtual machine, and that is the virtual machine for the coming 3 years. This is a solution that you could apply in the cloud, but I will say, hey, that would be a very expensive solution for you. The better way is to look, hey, what is really the need of that application? So if you look at certain characteristics of an application, some applications you only need on certain time. So the time you don't need it, why should you run it on? You can turn it off. Or you know for certain applications when they need to grow and when they don't need to grow. So you can also cope with that situation. So what we talk about is right sizing. Adapt the workload you are needing to the requirements you are giving to that application. And only the thing with the cloud is, what I need, I'm going to pay for. So what I don't need to pay for. But if I still do using the old principles, hey, then again, you're paying also for the stuff you are not using.
Yeah, and we did a lot of data center transformation stuff. And we figured out, and it's based on research, is that only in 10% of the cases, systems need to be on 24/7. And in all the other cases, you have other scenarios. So having your system on 24/7 is not always the best move from a pay-per-use perspective.
Yeah, another thing, if you're talking about the pay-per-use, actually I want to have more details in it. Now, Azure is offering you already some other solution, coming back again to the self-service part. If you go into that cost management, you get also a nitty-gritty view on how those resources are used and what costs are behind those resources. And again, also you come also for this, choosing the right virtual machine, you come back again to the continuous change principle. You monitor what is the really need of my platform. You adapt the right template again, so you can add GPUs or remove CPUs into the machine, and then apply the whole machine again, and then do the whole process again. And if you know already when the certain workloads are needed, you can also schedule those things, when to scale the extra workloads or add extra workloads in it. And when you don't need it, you can turn them off. Think about your remote desktop services. If you need them already from 9 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and at night they will not use, so why leave them on? You can also turn them off at night because those machines are not used.
And last but not least, Scalable. And Scalable is related to the previous one, but we go a little bit more in depth. And that is, if you have a system and you look at your new systems in the cloud as systems you had on premise, you will end up paying way too much money, but you will also end up in systems that are not scalable enough. So to dive a little bit more in the scalable principle.
Yep. Now we're talking about that scalable, and there's also again doing it's intertwined with the self-service part. You can already run the scalability within the Azure platform by building your own automation scripts, infrastructure as a code. But within the platform, there's already, from a self-service perspective, also a lot of functionality in there where you can do auto-scaling. You can even build scale sets based out of the parameters that are coming in, and Azure will automatically increase those workloads or decrease those workloads again. But also, again, you can intertwine that with the Azure Monitor, where you can also get the events in there. Based on the events, you can process that stuff and also activate another automation script. And the automation script can make sure that certain machines get turned off, or that certain machines will be increased, or that some other templates are activated, whatever the needs are, and you can play around it. So a lot of things can already be automated in Azure.
Yeah, so just one step back, Herman. So if you have systems in an on-premise environment and you want to move to the cloud, you don't copy the characteristics from that machine and put it and implement it in the cloud. That's not what you do. What you do is you look to the use you want from that machine, and then you even take a machine that's a little bit under equipped for that task, and you turn on auto scaling. That's a really important thing. What we see is that people convert the on-premise world to the cloud world, and that's a really, really impractical way of doing things. So be sure to use this principle, turn on auto scaling, do it in an automatic way. You can do it by hand, but do it in an automatic way, like a monitor. Really important principle. So by closing off this principle session, we have 8. This is not like a menu. You can do your own principles. You can add principles to this list. You can remove a few principles if they're not useful for you. But in the end, if you have principles, you have a really controlled way in your cloud journey. And that cloud journey, if you have the right principles, it can be really your IP. You can distinct yourself from your competitors. You can distinct yourself from other parties that do things with cloud by having your own principles. So I hope these principles are useful for you. Again, we wrote a book and a playbook. That playbook is available. These are the links. You can scan the code and then you will get access to the playbook. At the end of the playbook, we have recommendations in how to proceed after implementing these principles. And I think that's it for now. If there are any questions, do we have questions?
Yeah. So, well, there's a question on, well, how do I get started? It's a very good overview on the principles, but here I am. I want to bring my business to the cloud, but how do I get started? Which principle? Maybe there's one principle they need to get started with, or is it the total overview? Well, you said there's no secret recipe, but...
No, and we thought 8 is not that much.
No.
So to reduce it to 1, I don't think that's a really smart thing to do. So I think you need to have at least these 8 in mind, and figure out if 1 or 2 are less important for you. But these are the most basic principles you can have. Yeah. So you can have more, but reducing it to way less, I don't think that's a smart idea.
No, but I don't think that was the actual question.
The
The question is where to get started.
See it also with the 8 principles as a guiding deck for yourself. Hey, when I'm going vanilla into the cloud. What are the things I really need to think about? See it as a guideline for your learning path, because if you're going into the cloud, then is also cost is also one of those requirements you should be. Build to fail is also one of those requirements. So work with your teams. It's not only something that is for the sales department, it's for the complete company. Is also that they're going into that transformation into the cloud, where those principles could be applicable. And also constantly apply it as continuous change. So you're going into this, use this guideline as your learning path. During the learning path, you're going to learn and get rich more more knowledge about the environment. Apply that knowledge again and apply and create your own guiding and your own principles. And maybe they are the same as the 8 of us. Maybe you're 10 or maybe you're 12. But you reuse those information and use that knowledge and build also your own guiding principles and your continuous change in going forward into the cloud. Because very important thing what we can say, what you do today in the cloud is not something you're going to do tomorrow, because that is constantly changing and evolving. And it's always in your benefit, those changes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so don't define a big project and plan a year ahead. Make small steps, experiment. So we nowadays we say we don't have a proof of concept, but we have a proof of experiment. You experiment, it's really an agile way of working. And if you embrace that agile way of working and you allow yourself to make mistakes, that's the best way to move into the cloud.
And I think you talked about learning and skilling. What we just discussed, the idea of maybe adding the content of this presentation, the content of the playbook in the Skills Academy, makes it really powerful, because then we can lay the connection between the principles and the learning paths that are available for that at Skills Academy. So that might be very interesting for you to know that this will probably be there. Well, I think after summer, I can say. Another question about continuous change. What do customers or partners need to set up to be benefiting from that principle? Because it's a very important one, especially in the cloud. Things are changing, but what do they need to set up to get started with that?
Let's start with the basic. We're talking about continuous change and just going over the starting point for most customers when they go into the cloud, they want to set up a virtual machine. So the start already, the first continuous change is not going into the platform, doing the setup and doing next finish, no. Going into the portal can be the first step, but when you go into the portal, is the next step is where you can download the ARM template out of it. Use that ARM template as your basis, because those are going back to what we all discussed about idempotency, because I have that ARM template and I do have changes, I do changes on that template. I will not go into the platform, do all kinds of manual changes, because that is not tracked. Use your template, do continuous change, do already the DevOps principles on that one, because that is infrastructure as a code, and it can be on very low level already to the portal. And in the next level, you are going to apply PowerShell or the command line prompt or other kinds of tools in there, or even use all kinds of third-party tools in doing the whole management of your infrastructure. But the basic level is use the templates.
Yeah. And it, of course, also requires an organizational change, or at least a change in behavior, or working in teams, agile teams.
So it's about a way of work, and it's also about continuous learning. So you need to develop the skills to learn quickly and adopt quickly, and that can be quite tough. The first time we encountered this phenomenon, continuous learning. Sometimes you think, I'm so long in this business, I know my way around. Who wants to tell me anything? But then you start to learn, and then you figure out, I know less than I thought I know. So learning is a really important thing. And if you have continuous learning, you have continuous change in technology, you need also processes that can adopt and that are flexible. If your processes are really rigid and you cannot change your processes, you can have all the technology in the world that can change. You can have people that can change, but they will still use the same process. So here again, people, process, technology, continuous change, it needs to be on all three areas.
Yeah. And very important, don't bring your current infrastructure to the cloud. And I think that's a key takeaway, and that goes wrong.
We always say that it's garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly. And that's.
And you really need to understand that cloud is a different way of doing things. It's not the same thing.
No, exactly. One more question about privacy, a part of the security principle. There's many privacy standards across the world. Does your principle provide guidance in there, or what?
So it is
or
in
Azure?
It is in the trust, in the trust principle. It's embedded in the trust principle.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. And so privacy and trust, it's related. And you cannot have trust without privacy.
No.
You can have privacy without trust, by the way, but not in the other way around. And there is a whole bunch of content. The thing is, it is a shared responsibility. So privacy, there is something we can do. We have tools, we have recommendations, we have landing zones, we have all kinds of templates how to implement a privacy-worthy environment. But in the end, there's also a responsibility on the other side. It is your data. So we can provide you the tools, we can provide you the mechanisms, but if you don't use them or you don't use them in the right way, you still have a privacy issue. But the good thing is there is a whole bunch of content in the Trust portal, and if that's not enough, contact Microsoft. We can help you with the privacy aspect, because trust is not really important, not only important for you, but it's really important for us. If we lack trust, that's a major issue. So the most important thing for us is trust, and we have a whole bunch of content.
And actually every or most of the privacy standards are supported, I guess.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Because there's many. It's not only
No, it's not
GDPR
only the
or-
GDPR, it's
Yeah.
way more than
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Okay, very important. I had a question. It's not on here. Well, we might get back to that question later. Can you? I know it. Is there a tool where companies of customers that want to turn to the cloud can do some calculations on total cost of ownership, or is there a tool like that available
There are
for
several
Azure?
tools, and you can go say to the Azure portal. There is the Azure calculator in there, but there's also some third-party tooling is out there. And let me point out one of the third-party tools that is created by the Cloud Lab, because then you can do a really TCO calculation. So you're looking in your nitty-gritty details based out of not going into your data center, but going into your bookkeeping. Hey, what are now really the costs I will be making in my current environment? There's FTE, what I'm paying for networking, what I'm paying for my storage environment. And then again, go into your data center looking at how is the mix of my virtual machines looking there. Using that tool and using already the knowledge base that are in there, they can make a very good assumption how that workload can run in Azure. Vanilla, doing the lift and shift.
Yeah.
But they also can apply, well, again, also principles. If I use right sizing on the environment, what will then drop the price of that will? When I use snoozing, the turning on and off, what will then the drop on the price will be? When I'm using the Azure hybrid use benefits, so I can bring on-premise license in the mix. When I use reserved instances, then you see also what are the price benefits for me when I'm using those principles. And also again, maybe when I don't want to use the virtual machine anymore, but I want to go from a virtual machine into a PaaS environment, for instance, from a physical database on my on-premise into database as a service, or from a remote desktop service into a Windows Virtual Desktop environment, they can also do those calculations, see, hey, okay, what are the price benefits? The nice thing is, because they are showing, as we say in the Dutch, apples and apples comparison, because otherwise you only compare a small part of the portion and you forget the other part. They could really show you the numbers based on what you already entered into the questionnaire, where there's a starting point, and give you a complete good overview. But that is a third-party tool, and also you want to work with those guys, but also come in us and we can bring you with the right people in contact.
And are there links in the playbook for that, for the Microsoft tool?
The Microsoft tool, there are links for the Azure calculator in there, but the Azure calculator also demands that you have a clear view what you want. So if you start to calculate, you go in there and just select the virtual machine, then you forget a lot of other things. So first make the architecture, because with if you're going to the learning path, if you build a virtual machine, there's also a storage component behind it, there's also a network component behind it, there's an IP number, etc., etc. It's not the focus for us to go into those details, but if you don't know those information and you go to the calculator, then you forget a lot of information and also a lot of pricing points. Yeah. So that's very important
and
to know.
And there's two risks, that your current way of working, you bring that to the cloud, that you're calculating that. And second is that you don't benefit of the other options that are available in the cloud,
exactly.
of course.
And we promote a tool right now, so that's not the best polite thing to do, but in this tool there's also a benchmark. And that's also nice. You can benchmark yourself against parties that look like you. Yeah. And that's also an interesting thing to do. Most important thing is, it is not about technology. So we have a lot of tools available that can do the technology part of transformation. But there is more. So this is all about people. This is about the processes stuff. So this is a broader tool. So you have to, I think, at least you have to look at a tool that provides you that information. Yeah. Otherwise, you cannot make a good decision to go to the cloud.
The basis is build your own knowledge, so you know, hey, what are the benefits I can get out of Azure? Or as we always say, how can I misuse Azure for my own benefits? So knowing what there is there, because the holy grail is not the virtual machine. The holy grail is there are a lot of other options out there, as we pointed out in those decision trees. Yeah. All workloads should not land on the virtual machine. There are tons of other options available.
Yeah, and the most difficult part in this whole discussion about money is there is value in innovation, and that's hard to express in a number. But look at the possibilities you have when you go to the cloud. There is all kinds of stuff with machine learning, with artificial intelligence, with blockchain. You can do so much more when you're in the cloud. Making that to a number is difficult, but it is important to have a feeling about what you can do in the future. What you can do now is clear, but what you can do in the future, you can basically almost do everything.
Yeah, true. one question from my side. How did you get to this idea, to create this framework of 8 principles? There's some passion behind it, because every time we talk,
Yeah.
I feel a lot of passion.
Yeah, it's basically an agile discussion.
Yeah.
We are going to partners, we're going to customers, and we have the discussion about transformation, digital transformation, cloud journeys. And we figured out that we always have the same discussion.
Yeah.
And it's always around these 8 principles. And then we didn't call it principles, it were just topics.
Yeah.
And then I had the psychology stuff, and I said, it almost looks like leading principles. You need to lead people in a certain direction. And that's how we came up with the principle stuff.
Yeah.
And then it figured out, and then we wrote them down, and that's how it
Yeah,
happened.
we use our own principles, and so we wrote it down, we automate the whole process, and now it is on continuous change, so there are new changes coming into, so there will be also new changes coming to the book. Yeah.
And also the principles are widely adopted now,
Yeah.
because I hear a lot
Yeah.
about it, not only in the Netherlands, but also.
No, and they are used in way more playbooks, so
Yeah.
so you can see it's like it spreads
Good.
like a coronavirus.
So if you're closer than 1.5 meter, then
Then
you have. But I think it's good, and thank you very much for the presentation, guys. I think it's good if you take a look at those principles. I think the QR code was on screen to go to the playbook, right?
Yeah.
On maybe the
It is.
previous slide. I think no, a couple of slides back.
Yeah, this is the QR code.
I think
Next slide, this one.
that is the code for the evaluation. Oh, but we will send the link or make it available.
Yeah, this is the other code.
Yeah. So this is the well, this is actually my cue now. So can I get the clicker, please? Yeah. Because you talked about continuous learning, and that's a good link to actually what we are doing in this series of webinars. And I think what we just said about making the principles available widely on Skills Academy, attaching the learning tracks to it, see what you can use to keep on learning, to keep your people learning, and everybody in the organization who needs to be connected to your cloud adoption. Well, again, thank you very much. For you, I would like to ask you to fill out the evaluation, and if you're one of the 5 lucky people at the end of this series, so next week is the last event, then you might win one of the 5 free role-based courses, advanced role-based courses by LLPA or one of the members. If you need more information about Skills Academy or about how we can support you in skilling your people or keep them continuously learning, we are there to help you. And you can contact us at info@thelpa.com, a central email address. But you can also have a look at the slide here, which of our members is located in your country. And you might already be in contact with them, and they can support you in all the topics that were discussed today, and all your skilling questions. Well, that leaves me to telling you what the topic for next week will be. And we have discussed many aspects of skilling, of skilling the workforce and bridging the skills gap. But next week we will be talking about how successful some customers were in in having that journey. So Ron Augustus will talk about his experiences with customers, but there will also be 2 customers talking about their experiences, and I think it's really worth also watching that webinar to close this series of 6. And I hope after this series you will be fully energized and convinced that skilling your people is the way to move forward to benefit from the cloud. I'd like to close now this morning. I already thanked Jan and Herman, and I want to thank you for watching, and see you next week.